Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm Sue Saller, and I'm so glad that you decided to spend the next couple of minutes with me. Today, I want to talk to you about something that has had a profound impact on my life, and that's coaching. Now, if you've been following me for some time, you know that I've had a podcast since January 2023, and since then, I personally have gone through quite a few changes over the last 11 months. It's now November 2023 at the time of this recording. And one of the things that has had an extreme profound impact on my life is coaching. And the reason I hired a coach was because I knew that there were things going on inside of me that I couldn't see, or that I knew that was there, but I wasn't sure how to change it. Now, my podcast is called Small Steps, Big Wins Podcast, and coaching is one of those things that I decided to do that really was a small step that has led to big wins in my life. And it would not have been possible without the help of a coach. Now, this is not going to be a plug for a coach or any coach in particular, but the reason I'm sharing this is that if you see things happening in your life or you see patterns that are being repeated, and you're not quite sure what to do, which was my case because I was seeing things happening over and over again, but I wasn't quite sure how to fix them. When I hired my coach and I started bringing these things to the surface, he helped me to see what I needed to do in order to change, or helping me to realize some behaviors that needed to either go by the wayside or have to be deconstructed and reconstructed again. So what coaching did was it allowed somebody from the outside to give me a perspective on what was going on the inside. So for me, hiring the coach, even though it was kind of costly, the return that I got for the money that I put in was far greater than what I spent, if that makes sense. So I'm very thankful and glad that I did it. And I didn't want you to just take my word for it. I also wanted to give you another perspective on coaching from one of my podcast guests. His name is Dave Homyak, and his podcast is coming out on Sunday. Or if you're listening to this afterwards, it's podcast number 77 if you want to take a listen to the entire podcast. But in the course of my conversation with him, Dave talks about his coach and what an impact it's been on his life and his perspective on coaching. So take a listen. So what helped you overcome the thought that, oh, it's crazy to hire a coach?
I think it was almost the same thought process. It kind of was the same process of the first cabin. If I really, if everything goes horribly wrong, what will I lose? And if things go really well, what will I gain? I'm like, well, I'll lose the coaching fees. And, my current coach is awesome. And I'm like, if I pay him, whatever I pay him, I've lost, I can lose that money, but he's always provided more value. And I find if you trust the process, saying I'm going to pay this money and there's no guaranteed returns, but this guy's pretty good, has a pretty good reputation, I think we're going to try that. And I think a lot of the growth that I've had is because not only from the teachability, but also kind of the coachability and the willing to spend money on coaches, on GoBundance, on other masterminds.
What was the most surprising benefits that you got out of coaching that maybe you didn't expect?
I would say ideas so certain coaches that aren't as good for entrepreneurs will be like, do this, do that. The coach I currently have is very honest. He goes, I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to think it's your idea and then you're going to do it. But in reality, it's going to be my idea, but that's okay. I don't need credit for any ideas. I need you to get to do this stuff. And basically asking questions on things that I would have never thought of. So it's very similar to very similar to kind of the VA company and getting somebody that worked for another VA placement company. Things are getting put in your mind that I would have never thought of. I can think of two instant examples, and I'm like, oh, that's like never would have occurred. Not only never would have occurred, but when he said them, I'm like, I'm not doing that. And it took like 2 months of him asking over and over and finally saying, how about we just do a comparison test? Because he could tell I wasn't going to do it. He tried to get me to agree to it. Nope, not doing it, not doing it. And then how about a comparison test? Because they're just giving you the softball is not helping. So yeah.
Once you realize that what he was suggesting works, does that change your interaction from now on out? Like if he suggests something now, you're not as resistant?
Exactly. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
that 30 years or 40 years of experience that he has, that actually does count for something. He's just not making this up. I'm like, oh, yeah. So it's
Sometimes it's hard to get out of our own way, isn't it?
it really is. So yeah, his name's Gary Kishbaugh, in case anybody's wondering. And he's really interesting guy, and he'll even talk about my teachability versus other people's teachability and stuff like that. And I think that's also an interesting metric if you are going to work with a coach of where am I?
Mm-hmm.
Am I really resistant? Am I not resistant? And
Yeah.
you want to get the maximum value, which is going to involve kind of listening to the guy that you're paying to coach you.
Yeah, right. And then, like you just don't go for a coach if you don't really want a coach. And I think to your point, you mentioned about different coaches. There's different coaches for different reasons. And I think it's important to make sure you get the coach to match why you're hiring that coach. As I close our Wednesday wisdom for today, I hope you got something out of listening to Dave's story. I also want to leave you with some questions to ask yourself. First, what was your big takeaway from today? Do you need to find a coach? Do you need to dig a little deeper to identify those areas that you want to change? What are your small steps you can take today to change your tomorrow? Whatever it is, if you decide to look for a coach, you can head over to my website, and under the coaching tab, there's a free PDF that you can download. And this contains questions that I needed to have answered when I started to look for a coach. What I didn't mention before is that it took me over 5 months to find my coach because honestly, I didn't want to just throw money away. I really wanted to make sure I found the right person for the job. So head over to my website, www.suesaller.com, and hit the coaching tab and you can check that out. Again, thank you for joining me on another Wednesday Wisdom. And as always, take those small steps that are going to lead to your big wins. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.